everything he has for us this morning, tonight. So, I want you to just get your heart ready and just be ready to be filled with the Holy Spirit. So to start that off, we are going to watch this worship video.
And that's her baby Chane'l. He's 8 months old in that photo. This is day 1 of coming to Casa Angelina. And I want to tell you her story, if you'll just leave that photo up. Well, I tell her story really quickly. Not really quickly, I'm going to tell you the details because I asked her permission to do it. And she said, absolutely, if my story can help somebody else start at day 1, tell everything. And Maria, she was very, very young when her mother abandoned her. She was 1, so she doesn't remember it. She just knew she was a baby. Her father also left, and she was living with her grandmother. Her grandmother started selling her from the age of 1.5 to men. And they would, of course, at that age, it's not possible to do some things with the baby, right? But you can try. And they would sexually abuse her, and they would pay money, and they would leave money with the grandmother every time. And she says her grandma would always say, I'm gonna go on an errand, and then she would close the door and lock her in, and the next person who would come in was a man. And she said she doesn't remember a time in her life when men were not abusing her, ever. When she was 11 years old, her grandmother switched her to go live with her father because her father came back in town. Didn't live with her, but came back in town. So she went to go live with him and her brother. Her brother then raped her. Her sister had a boyfriend who she later married who also raped her. A neighbor raped her. She's 11 now at this point, and now she's just turns 12 and she's pregnant. And she doesn't know what pregnant means. She's had no one explain anything to her. She has lived a life literally. I mean, the stories, the details are very intense, obviously, and we don't need to go into those. But she lived a life of trauma, basically, from the time that she was born. Very little, beautiful and innocent, and all that was stolen from her, completely. And as she was pregnant, her stomach began to grow, and her father, of course, said, this is all your fault, you're just loose. Who have you been with? What's going on? Why would you do that? You're only 12. Made her feel shame and guilt. She knew that she hadn't done nothing. She knew that she always knew that it was wrong what was happening to her, and she would fight and she would try. But then by the end too, you just live in terror at the end. There's no fighting anymore of anything. You just live in terror and you just wait for the next abuser to come. And she felt more alone than she has words for. She always talks about the loneliness of living in abuse. The loneliness you feel because it comes with shame. It separates you from people that could help you. It separates you from people that could rescue you out of that. And after telling her grandma, and she didn't believe her, and after telling, because now we know her grandma was selling her, after telling her father and he didn't believe her, she didn't know who else to turn to. Everybody else was an abuser, so what do you do? And she was growing and growing, and her father said, I just want you to know, you cannot live in this house if you don't work. So he said, you have no time off. When that baby comes, you just keep going. And one night she began to bleed, and so she went to the hospital by herself at 12 years old. And they said, this baby's coming, but because she's such a tiny little thing, they did a C-section on her, they did operation, and they put her out for it alone in the hospital at 12. When she came up awake from that, she didn't even know what had happened. No one explained what's a C-section or what's the recovery, what's gonna happen to your body or anything. So she woke up and she felt really sore in her stomach, she said, and she twisted around to sit up on the side of the bed, and she stood up. And in Guatemala, you don't get your own room when you have a baby. You share a room with a lot of other women, other moms. In every hospital, it's like that. There's no place, there's private hospitals you can pay for to have your baby alone in your own private room. But there's very few of those. And of course, she couldn't afford anything. And the lady next to her had dumped over water right by her bed, and the nurses hadn't cleaned it up or anything. So when she stood up on the side of her bed, she slipped and fell, and she opened the whole C-section wound. And she remembers crying out, and then the pain was overwhelming. She was coming in and out of consciousness, and she remembers the nurses saying, "How is she still alive? She's losing so much blood, and how is she still alive with the pain?" And she blacked out, and when she came to again, they had closed her again. But they said, "It's very possible you're going to have an infection. It's very possible you're going to feel badly. Go home and rest." But she knew she couldn't go home and rest. The minute she was home, she has to work. And she got home that evening, walked home after they closed her up. Now, anybody who's had a C-section knows you're not walking 3 hours later. She walked home with her baby tied on her back like they do. And she walked in, and she said she was bleeding through all her bandages. And it smelled really badly, and she didn't know what to do. And her dad said, "You're on this is your job in the morning, and I need you to go." And she was pushing wheelbarrows to go sell stuff from the farm where they worked. And I'm not going to cry because it's amazing. I just cry from joy and excitement and all the things that the Lord is doing in her life. But she was pushing the wheelbarrow, and it's like they have not highways, but roads, right? In Guatemala, and there was 4 lanes like this, and she was on this side, and she had to cross the 4 lanes, and she was in so much pain in that moment. She just remembers, she didn't talk to God, she never was taught religion or praying to God or anything, but she says she remembers crying out and saying, "There's no way that I can do this. I don't think anybody's there, nobody's listening to me." There was nobody around. It's really early in the morning. There was one bus coming because the buses run really early. And she just said, "This is it." And she walked right out. Right before the bus came, she walked right out in front of the bus to end her life. And she closed her eyes and just pushed, and her baby was tied on her back. And all she said is that when her eyes were closed, she felt this push from behind, and she heard this whoosh sound. And she opened her eyes, and she was 4 lanes on the other side of the highway standing there, and there was nobody around her. And in that moment, she realized that God had literally saved her life, literally pushed her to the other side of the road. And it gave her the hope she needed in that moment of a life of hopelessness.
Wow.
Of a life of literally calling out and nobody ever answers you. Yes. It gave her what she needed in that moment to call for help. And she went to the police. She explained what was happening. They put her in a hospital to heal correctly. They took her out of that house. They put her there for a couple of months to heal. It took a long time. She had major infections, and she could have very possibly died from what had happened, just with her operation not being cared for. And when she came out, she came to us, and this is her straight from there. This is day 1. And I remember meeting her. I took this picture of her, and I remember meeting her at the front gate, and she was closed, hard, difficult, untrusting. She didn't see that as day 1 of some kind of miracle, wonderful life. At the moment, it was just another place. Who knows what these men are going to do to me? This is just my whole life. And now I have a baby that I'm supposed to care for? And everyone's saying, "This is your responsibility, and why did you do that if you didn't want a baby," and all that. Just don't even get me started. And she came to us here, and I want you to see the next picture. This is her today. This is her now. This is her now. I want you to go back one more time. This is day 1, and then now today, I did the math. This is day 3087. 3087. And she's a miracle. She's so beautiful. You can leave that there. Because she was so young and she had never gone to school, she had a very hard journey ahead of her when she came to Casa Angelina. We really prioritized education with the kids. And we made her go through school. And she did 3 grades in 1 year for the first 3 years. And then she graduated way older than you're supposed to be when you graduate high school, technically. But none of that actually matters. And she graduated, now she's in her 2nd year of studying psychology. She's at university. Can you even just Can you even just imagine? Her little boy, Chane'l, he's gonna pass her up in height. He's 9 years old, and he was first in his class this year. He's amazingly smart. She got all 90s and above in university in both years. She is so smart, and she always talks about day one now. She's always like, day one, I had no idea that I could get to day 3,000. But in day one, somebody told me this will pass. Somebody told me you can start again. Somebody said there's another chance. Just give it a chance. Just give it some time. In the hardest days when she did not want to be a mom, I remember many visits in her room just talking and sitting, and her like, I didn't ask for this. I just want to be a child. I'm 13. I'm 14. I'm 15. School and this. And how am I going to do this? And I just kept saying, it's actually going to pass. You just have to keep going. If you quit, ladies, you know what will happen. But if you keep going, you have no idea the possibilities. It's bigger and it's better than you can imagine. But she had to give herself permission to have that day 1, and day 10, and day 15. And now when she looks at her photos, she keeps both of them there. And she looks back and says, whatever hard thing is happening in my life at this moment, I know it's just day 1. And the beautiful thing is that in those times of our lives, God sends people into our lives who are at day 1,000. He sends people into your life that are at day 5,000. And they go, oh, girl, I'm with you. I understand. I was there too. Just keep going. Just give yourself that day 1 again. Give yourself another chance. Give yourself another opportunity. Because it's going to get better. Just don't give up on yourself. And I tell you Maria's story because I look at her life and I just say, do you know the miracle that you are because you didn't give up? And she says, but I did give up, remember? I walked in front of that bus. I totally gave up. And I'm like, I know. But then Jesus saved you and he gave you the extra chance. How many of us know that when we didn't give ourselves a chance, he gave us a chance anyway? And then as a result of that, there comes a point though when you start fighting for yourself again. And that is a point of maturity that changes your life in that moment when you begin to fight for yourself again. You got a lot of people fighting for you. You got everybody here fighting with you. And there comes a point when the Holy Spirit needs you to say, Emily, I give myself a chance. Michelle, I give myself a chance. When you say to yourself, I give myself a day 1. I can start from here. And day 1 is hard and it's ugly sometimes, and it's very hard to see the future when you're at the very start. It's very hard to see far in the distance. But those people who come around you, even if it's for a moment, and they say, well, I already got to day 500 and it's way better than day 1. Those people are there for a reason. The Lord is bringing them into your life to encourage you. Because as they're there, he's going to show you that he makes rivers in the wilderness. He makes rivers in the wilderness. And roads in the desert, or roads in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, both ways. He makes a way where there seems to be no way. And as he does that in our lives, our whole perspective is grown. And what now is so beautiful about Maria as well, that's incredible, that encourages me constantly, is that this story, it took her a while to come from a place of shame about her testimony. It wasn't like she came to Casa Angelina and wanted to tell everybody what she suffered through. You always think that your story maybe is the worst story. But it's just not. It's just not. Who am I? What did we just read? Who am I to boast in anything or anyone except the cross? Who am I to say my story is better than yours or worse than yours? Who can boast in anything natural except in the supernatural cross, which rescues us, which all of us have to bend our knee to and say, here is my story in my life. Here are all of my failures. And Maria came to that point in her life, and when she did that, that entire story changed for her. And she's begun to write a book of the testimony of her life. She's got 7 chapters. I've read them. They're amazing. Tear jerkers. I don't know how I'm going to get through a whole book. But one day I'm going to be standing here and I'm going to say, this is the book. of Maria Poo's testimony. And you know that because she allowed that day 1 to be transformed into day 3087 now, and when that book goes out to touch people's lives, it's just going to give people hope again, to restart, and to the fact that they can, with anything, start again. And I just feel like